Let's talk about Big Ten quarterbacks today, breakout, bust, and sleeper. I'm excited. Let's talk about it. Okay, so we know the Big Ten has been very, very good at the quarterback position for a long time. Lots of NFL guys, lots of Heisman Trophy winners, and guys who have really filled up the stat sheet. This year, there's really only one that I look at and go, okay, he's a sure thing, and that's C.J. Stroud, the quarterback at Ohio State. I think Michigan State's quarterback, Peyton Thorne, and Purdue's quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, are guys that are probably sure things to put up some numbers, but they've already done it in the past. So today, we're going to talk about three guys who maybe could ascend to another level in the pecking order in the Big Ten, a guy who's maybe going to disappoint a little bit this year, and maybe a guy who nobody's talking about, or at least people outside the Big Ten aren't talking about enough. So let's start with the breakout. Taulia Tagovailoa, the quarterback at Maryland, and I know everyone's going to say, what, he broke out last year, right? No, I don't think he really did. And the reason I don't think he did is because I see him taking a huge step this year. So let's dive into his stats really quick. He completed 69% of his passes. That's phenomenal. 3,860 yards, 28 total touchdowns, 11 interceptions. And I think a lot of people are going to say, well, that's really good. That's a really good season. Like, what could he do better? Well, how about this? He played Iowa, Ohio State, Minnesota, and Michigan. Those were his four worst games last year, and they were against four teams who were very solid a year ago. So he only scored 7 touchdowns in those 4 games and had 8 interceptions, and his team was outscored 210 to 65. That is a guy who just did not show up in 4 of the biggest games on Maryland's schedule, yet they still made a bowl. He really came out and just did not play well. And I think the biggest thing that you look at and go, okay, 7 touchdowns, 8 interceptions in just those 4 games. Well, how about in the other 9 games that he played last year? Because they made a bowl game. How about 21 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions? That's kind of the ceiling for him, right? And even if he meets somewhere in between, that is a heck of a season. That is a guy who's potentially elevating his team to maybe 8, 9 wins, maybe even 10 wins if he's able to be consistent enough and also win the close games. Now, as we know, this is not a team that is going to be completely well-rounded. They're not going to be good on the defensive side, but I do think if you look at their schedule, their offense has the opportunity to be one of the top, maybe 10, maybe even top 5 offenses in the country, especially through the air. So if you kind of look at how the schedule sets up for him, non-conference games against SMU and Charlotte and Buffalo. I mean, those are 3 really just kind of entertaining games where he's going to be able to put up a lot of points. Those are all 3 bad defenses, and he should have a lot of success. And so if you kind of look at that start to the year mixed with a conference schedule that is pretty balanced, outside of a stretch in November, which is going to be rough. Don't get me wrong. At Wisconsin, at Penn State, and Ohio State, all in November, that's really tough, especially because it's going to be cold in all 3 of those games. But the rest of the schedule, the only one that stands out is at Michigan, which is the first conference game of the year. Yes, that's going to be tough, but after having 3 games where he's going to put up a lot of points going into that Michigan game, the team should be relatively healthy, and I think he'll be able to put up some points even in Ann Arbor, even though I expect them to lose by a large margin. I think the biggest thing that when I look at him and kind of his body of work last year, 3 of his 11 interceptions came in the last 7 games, so he improved taking care of the ball. I would say in general, he did an okay job taking care of the ball outside the Iowa game in which he had 5 interceptions. If you take that, maybe push it down to just 2, then he only has 8 interceptions on the year, but you can't do that. Stats don't work that way. But if you do kind of look a little bit deeper, you see a team that returns 4 offensive linemen from a year ago. So they're going to be able to probably run the ball a little bit better and take care of the quarterback a little bit better as well. They went out, added Jacob Copeland, former 4-star receiver from Florida. So he transfers in. They already have Dante Demas, who's coming back off of injury. He didn't play the last 7 games. That's significant. And they have Raheem Jarrett, who I think is a dark horse to win the Blitnikoff and is one of the best receivers in the entire country. You put that all together, and I think Taulia Tagovailoa has an opportunity to be one of, if not the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. Sorry, can't put him at number one. That's C.J. Stroud. Moving on to the next category, how about sleeper? My sleeper this year in the Big Ten is Nebraska quarterback Casey Thompson. He's replacing Adrian Martinez, who had a great career statistically, but the losses just piled up for him throughout his career. His inability to take care of the football really piled up, and injuries. Injuries kind of derailed him a little bit as well. A year ago, they were 3-9. All 9 of those losses were by less than 9 points. And I think Casey coming in, providing that stability, taking care of the football in crucial moments will be huge for this Nebraska program. He completed 63% of his passes, 2,113 yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So he was solid last year at Texas. He didn't start the year as the starter. Hudson Card did. He worked his way to being the starter. And then, of course, now Quinn Ewers is the starter there at Texas. He made the move to Nebraska, and now they're just trying to build around him. And I think they did a pretty good job of that. They got Mark Whipple, who was the offense coordinator for Pitt when Kenny Pickett had his monster year. I think he can come into Nebraska and provide a similar template for Casey Thompson this season. The offensive line should be solid. The only big loss they had on the offensive line was Cam Jurgens at center. And then at wide receiver, they went out and really tried to add, right? You know, they got Omar Manning back and Alante Brown. I expect Brown to be a little bit better this year. And then Trey Palmer, the transfer from LSU, and Marcus Washington, the transfer from Texas, who already has a rapport with Casey Thompson. I think that just all sets up really well for this Nebraska team to get back to a bowl, be even more competitive than they were a year ago, maybe get to 8 wins. And I think Casey Thompson, when healthy, is actually a very, very good quarterback who should do some damage in the Big Ten this year. Moving on to my bust, and, you know, this is one where I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with this, but I think Penn State quarterback Sean Clifford is a guy who people need to watch this year. And the reason I say that is because this is his 4th year as a starter, and last year they did not have a lot of success. They were 7-6. He had a pretty mediocre year, 3,107 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, but he really disappointed in some of their biggest games. And for that reason, I think they might look at other options. And when you look on the depth chart, you see Drew Aller, who was the #1 quarterback in the 2022 class. And he's a guy who I think is going to come in there and compete for the job immediately. And my reasoning for it is all about ceiling, right? This Penn State team has a lot of talent, but can Sean Clifford reach a ceiling that he really hasn't reached during his career at Penn State? Because right now, when I look at this team, the roster with Sean Clifford at quarterback, I see an 8-4 team. That's just kind of what I see. I see a team that still has deficiencies on the offensive line, still not going to be great running the ball, even though adding Nick Singleton, a highly rated running back recruit, will definitely help. I still don't see them being elite there. So they need a quarterback who can really, really go out and produce, and not only produce and get you to a point where you can win games, get you to a point where you are winning games. And I think that's the biggest thing, a quarterback that can actually go out and win one for you instead of just game manage the whole time. And maybe that's disrespectful of Sean Clifford's career, but at this point, what I've seen is a game manager. And I think Penn State at this point, to win the Big Ten, needs more than that. So that is my breakout, sleeper, and bust from the Big Ten. I think there's a lot of candidates to kind of be a sleeper from some of those lower level teams like Indiana or Northwestern, but those 3 seem to be really good fits for the discussion today. And I think some of these quarterbacks in the Big Ten are really going to surprise some people next year. But for Grayson Grunhafer, this has been CFB with JD.